small disclaimer before we get started with the guide is that you'll need to go into your 3D settings if you have an NVIDIA GPU. So you'll want to navigate to Manage 3D Settings and then go all the way down until you can see Threaded Optimization and click on Off. Once this is done, you want to click on Apply and restart your game. This is preventing a bug that I've written on about called Preemptive bug that I will not be covering right now, but if you have an NVIDIA GPU, make sure to do that. It's super important. Okay, so let's get started. The very first thing that you'll want to do is, once you enter the stronghold, go into your option, video setting, and turn the entity distance to 50%. You also want to lower the render distance to 8 chunks. Technically, the render distance could be slightly higher or slightly lower, it doesn't necessarily matter, but as good practice, we want it to be at 8 chunks. You want to lower your FOV as well to 30 FOV. Once this is done, the very first thing that you want to do is open the pie chart by pressing Shift and F3, head into Game Renderer, Level, and Entities. So the only value that we care about is the block entities one, as well as the unspecified one. If you struggle to read them, that's pretty normal because the pie chart is very small, but what you can do is just look at the big orange slice as well as the small green one. If you're really starting out, don't bother with much. The only thing that you want to look for is the biggest slice that you'll be able to see that is orange, the big orange basically. So I'm going to spin around. And there I can clearly see that in this very direction, there is a big spike. And if I look here at the percentages, I can see that this is 55%. Meanwhile, if I look in this direction, this is 40%. Adding me here, I wanted to specify that you should be spamming F3 plus Shift as you spin around the stronghold. The reason you want to do that is because the pie chart takes a bit of time before an entity loads in. Meanwhile, spamming it allows for faster feedback. So I'm going to go back to my normal FOV and I'm going to navigate in this way. And as you can see, the power room is in this direction. So as nice as it may be to know that you have to use your pie chart to find the power room, there's a little more edge cases. The very first thing that you want to do is hop on this map that was made by Adlema that is kind of made to benchmark your own values and to test like some different edge cases that you will 100% encounter. The very first thing that you'll want to look at is the silverfish spawner there that you can see. I will be going into my usual 50 entity distance and 8 chunks render distance, and I'll be going to 30 FOV. I'll be going into the normal pie chart as well, and you can see there that my value is very different from what I was seeing in the stronghold. And the reason for that is because depending on the blocks that are going to be in front or behind the spawner, the values are going to change. So this is very slight, and this is not technically a change because the percentage in total, if you add up block entities and unspecified, are going to be the same. Like there, if you add up the block entities that I have, 40%, as well as the unspecified value, this is equal to 52%. This is pretty much the same thing that we were seeing in the stronghold earlier. However, you need to be aware of that because you'll be seeing a lot of different cases because every stronghold are generating in a different way. Okay, so now we're going to see the different values that the pie chart is going to output depending on very small variation, but that are very common, that are like super important to learn. So the one that we've just seen is called a purest rating. It's when basically only the silverfish spawner is rendered. There is no like chest, there is no library, there is nothing. And so this is like called the purest rating pretty much. The spike is sort of the rarest because there is always going to be like a library or a mineshaft. It's always going to be scuffed, or like there is like the altar chest. And it's kind of like easy to just forget about this because you're not going to see it often. But it's very good to know because sometimes you would just not see a big spike and you'll get like very much confused when this is there. Okay, so now we're going to see the second case that I call the average reading. And this one, the chest is just located in the way between the player and the silverfish spawner. So you can see it right here pretty much. And if we look closely, the total is going to be around, like, for me, 55%. Sometimes it will go up to like 60%. But like the thing that we really want to focus on in here is that the ratio between the block entities sliced on a pie and the unspecified one are fairly different from what we just saw earlier. And there isn't much to be added to it. It's just, you know, it's 55% and you want to like add block entities and unspecified, and that's it. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the very much most common and widely known type of spike that I like to call the big orange, because it is basically super easy to read. You can see on the pie that the block entities are taking pretty much half of the size of the pie, and this is super easy to read. This is super common, and this is basically because the chest that is located here, as long as the chest is located behind a spawner, it will have priorities unlike any other scenario. So like, let's say that I have a chest in front as well, the game does not care and it will just give you this very specific reading. In this case as well, you can see that the percentage is pretty much the same. So like we've been like pretty consistently hitting 55%, and it is pretty much the same on all of them. Okay, so now I'm going to go over some basics and things that you really want to follow when you're doing preemptive. The very first one is that you do not want to be using chunk borders, because if I look at my spike right now, you can see it just divides for some reason block entities, and unspecified to each be 33% of the pie. And very obviously, if I just like spin around or anything, it will just be 33% everywhere and it will not give you any info whatsoever. Another thing that you want to avoid is highlighting blocks, because as you can see there, it's completely eating away my unspecified value and I cannot read the spike. Whereas if I'm not highlighting it, this is very easy to read, unless you're using hitboxes. So if you have hitboxes on, this is not an issue and you almost want to be highlighting blocks, because it turns pretty much everything into big orange. Okay, so now we're going to look at the values of different mob spawners, because very obviously when you're going to see something like a dungeon or you're going to see a mine shaft, those have spawners, and the spawners aren't silverfish spawners, so it's going to impact the value that you read on the pie chart differently. There, let's get started with a cave spider spawner. That is, as you can see for me on my hardware, 60%. And this is fairly easy to tell because usually when you have a mine shaft, there is a bunch of spawners pretty much everywhere. So you're not going to be able to get a clear reading. You're not going to be able to get a pure reading. And since there is like spawners pretty much everywhere, you should be able to tell that there is a mine shaft, and you should be able to adapt your preemptive navigation based on that. Like maybe you're going to go down a few rooms, you're going to be going down mid, and try to redo preemptive and avoid those parts where there is the spawner, that where you know the spawner is for sure. But this is very obviously not that consistent, but there is no workaround, unfortunately. Very similar for other spawner. I'm pretty sure the spider spawner, the classic spider spawner, is the same. As you can see there, yeah, it's the exact same. Then we're gonna take a look at the skeleton spawner. This one is like pretty much even easier to tell. It's like the easiest one to tell because it's far higher than any other that you'll ever encounter. Like there, for me, it's around like 75% if I add unspecified and block entities, which is like super high. It's gonna be the same thing pretty much as like when you see a dungeon or a mine shaft. You don't really have to worry about it. It's just avoid going into this direction. If you see the spawner, break it and try to do preemptive again, but a lot of the time it's going to be very annoying. But there is another case, which is by far the worst, which is the zombie spawner, because for some reason, I do not know why this is the case, but it just happens to be. The value of the zombie spawner and the value of the silverfish spawner are the exact same, which means that you just cannot differentiate them. So this is going to be 50% for me here, and if I look at the silverfish spawner, it's going to be 50% as well, which makes it pretty much impossible to discern them because, well, as I said, it's the same percentage. If you see a zombie spawner, you really want to make sure to break it, just as like any other spawner, honestly. But also, a lot of the time, you're going to get a spike that feels right, you're going to go down a direction, and it's just going to end up being a zombie spawner that is like hidden somewhere behind a wall. And this is really unfortunate, but there is no workaround either. It's kind of like the unlucky situation, but it is still much better than having to go randomly in the stronghold. Like it is better to have like a direction to follow. So sometimes you might want to give it a try even if you're not sure. Sometimes it's going to be a gamble. Another thing that I want to showcase is the difference that mobs are in front of you in the stronghold, even if you don't see them, they are still being rendered, impacts your spike. So as an example there, if I look in front of me, I can see that despite having 3 creepers, this is not going to impact my spike at all. On the other hand, if there is a mob like a spider, the spike that we're going to see behind is going to be completely negated. So there, I simply cannot tell whether or not there is a silver spawner, because for some reason the spiders completely destroy the spike. So if you see a spider, you want to make sure to kill it. Sometimes you're just going to have a lot of spiders spawn, and this is very unlucky because you're not going to get a spike, and there's not much you can do about that. Most other mobs don't really impact the spike, so I'm not really going to go over it, but it's still pretty interesting to know. And if you have to classify them, I'm pretty sure that the one that you really don't care about is the creeper. Then the skeleton is pretty chill. There is no much issues with the way it impacts the spike. The zombie is a bit worse, but if you don't have too many, it shouldn't be a bother really. And then you have the spiders that are just horrendous to deal with, and there isn't much of a fix, unfortunately. Okay, so now we're going to get into some very much details of Preemptive, something that is called the t-value and the mob weight. The basic thing that you want to remember is that if there is a lot of mobs around you, so basically you're gonna look at your E counter on the left of your screen, the thing they use for the E-ray. The one on the left is E-ray, it's like the amount of entities that there is in the direction that you're looking at. And the other one is called T, and it is like the total amount of mobs that are in the 8 chunks that I am seeing there. And so depending on the t-value, the spike is going to change slightly. When I say slightly, it's just by a few percentages. So like if the t-value is, let's say, 100, so like there's 100 mobs around me, I'm going to get a lower value. So like as an example, it might be there, I can see like block entities, 50%. It might go down to like maybe 46%. And on the other hand, if the t-value is very low, like let's say 8 for some reason, I don't think that is possible. The value is going to be far higher, like it could go up to like 60%. And a lot of the time you're going to see stuff like, oh, you just did a second portal right into the stronghold and the mobs haven't loaded in yet. And that's why sometimes your spike is going to be much higher than you get if you're just in this map, because there is less mobs. And this is pretty important to know as well. Sometimes when doing preemptive, you might be confused as to where exactly to go. Because let's say there I get a spike right in front of me. Well, do I need to go very much on the edge here? Do I need to go on the edge here? Is it like right in front of me? I'm not sure. And so there is the thin macro that we can use that allows us to go to pretty much tell very easily where the spike is. So there I can see 52% right in front of me. And if I undo thin and I go right in this direction, I can see that this goes to the stronghold exactly. And as you can see there is a mineshaft, but it doesn't necessarily impact the way you do preemptive because we don't have any mob spawner close. So even if you see a mineshaft sometimes, it is still worth doing preemptive. You should always be doing preemptive. Adding me again, I also wanted to specify that if you don't get a spike, and this is fairly important, this is gonna happen fairly often, but it is sort of hard to replicate, so I don't really have any footage for this. You want to look if there are any hidden rooms in the starter, and you want to open them up. And sometimes this will just like free the spike and you will be able to find the portal room. Another small thing that isn't included in the doc that I wanted to touch on quickly is when you should or shouldn't be using hitboxes. You should always have hitboxes on if you're doing a second portal into the stronghold because it lets you highlight blocks while scanning, which makes finding the portal room far easier since you don't have to go around the portal and you still get a spike. On the other hand, if you're digging down, make sure not to use hitboxes. Mobs are far more likely to spawn on a dig down, and they can mess up really badly with your values, especially with hitboxes on.